everyone, welcome back to my channel. It's Karen here from www.gethookedupcrochet.com. Otherwise, you know me on social media as @HookedUpCrochet. Today, we're making the Trident Puff Beanie. This beanie is so easy to make. After a few rows, you don't even have to look at the pattern anymore. So, let's get our materials together and get to making. For this crochet pattern, you will need less than 250 yards of worsted weight yarn, size I crochet hook, yarn needle, scissors, and measuring tape. I originally planned on using Lion brand jeans yarn, but this Vanna's Choice is also a size 4 and I feel like it shows up much better on camera, so I'm going to use that for this tutorial. Okay, for the adult size band, I'm going to start off with a slip knot, then I'm going to chain 8, and in the second chain from the hook, I'm going to work 1 single crochet in each stitch across. So here's my chain 8, and now I'm going to single crochet 7 across. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And then I'm going to give my band a nice tug to straighten out my stitches, chain 1, and turn. Now, for the rest of the band, you're going to work 1 single crochet in the both loops for your first stitch and your last stitch. And in the middle, we'll work through the front loop only. So there's both loops, front loop, front loop, front loop, front loop, front loop, and then my last stitch, both loops. So, and then I will chain 1 and turn. My first stitch will go through both loops. Stitch number 2 will be in the front loop only. Number 3 will be in the front loop. Number 4 will be in the front loop. Number 5 will be in the front loop. Number 6 will be in the front loop. And number 7 will be through both loops. The reason why I do this is so my band will have a nice clean edge at the top and the bottom. You will continue making your band until you've reached your desired length. For the adult size, my band measures 19 inches long. So instead of sitting here and having you guys watch me make my entire band, I'm going to speed up the video just a little bit and I'll meet you back when my band is complete. Okay, as you can see here, my band has reached 19 inches long. So now I'm going to connect the two ends together by lining up my stitches and slip stitching the two ends together. So you're going to chain 1, and now we are going to line up our stitches and slip stitch. So there's number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, number 6, and number 7. And now I'm going to turn my band right side out, and don't worry about this little yarn tail, we'll be able to hide it. So now your band is complete. For round 1, we are going to chain 1, then work 1 single crochet around the top of our band, spacing them out evenly to achieve 61 single crochets all the way around. Now, if you cannot achieve 61 single crochets, the base stitch count of this pattern is any multiple of 6 plus 1. For the adult size, I got 61 because 60 is a multiple of 6, then plus 1, making 61 single crochets all the way around. So instead of sitting here watching me single crochet all the way around, I'm going to speed up this part of the video. Okay, as you can see here, I've made my last single crochet. Now I'm going to slip stitch to my very first stitch, and now my round 1 is complete. For round 2, we are going to chain 1 and single crochet in our first stitch. Next, you will skip 2 stitches, skip 1, skip 2, and in that next stitch we are going to work the Trident Puff stitch. So we are going to work a puff stitch, chain 1, then add the chain, then go back into that same stitch, work another puff stitch, chain, add another chain, work one last puff stitch. 5, 7, yarn barf, 9, 11. Pull through, chain. Now, after that, you're going to skip 2 stitches. So there's that stitch right there in the next one, and then you will single crochet in the next stitch. And you're going to repeat this all the way around. And I like to go through and fix my little trident puffs as I make them. You can do it now or at the very end of this round. So we're going to skip 2 stitches, then in the next stitch we're going to work another trident puff stitch. Make sure you read the stitch description in the pattern on how to do the Trident Puff stitch. It looks really tricky, but it's very easy. So we're working back into that same stitch. We're working another puff stitch. And honestly, I do not count how many loops I do anymore when I'm making puff stitches. I just go based off of how it looks, but I do suggest 11 loops on your hook, but you will see me do 9, sometimes I will do 11, and sometimes I really mess up and I do 13. This is such a forgiving pattern that it's not a huge deal. So okay, there's my trident puff. I skipped 2 stitches, and the next stitch I'm going to single crochet. So you're doing this all the way around. So after my single crochet, I'm going to skip 2 stitches, then work another trident puff stitch. So 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, pull through, chain, chain. 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, chain, chain. Same stitch, we're going back into it, working 3, 5, 7, 9, 11. Yarn over, oops, see, I did 13 there. Chain. And then we are going to skip 2 stitches and single crochet in the next stitch. And I'm just doing this all the way around. After my single crochet, I skip 2 stitches, then I work a trident puff stitch. So keep working this all the way around, and I will meet you at the end of this round. Okay, as you can see here, I am coming to the end of this round. I have one more trident puff stitch to make. So I'm going to skip 2 and then work my very last trident puff. And I'm sorry if you guys can hear the train in the background. So here's my last trident puff. Chain, chain, going back into that same stitch, I'll work another puff stitch, chain, chain, my last puff stitch of this Trident Puff, whoops, turn over, pull through, chain, then I'm going to skip 2 stitches and single crochet in my very last stitch of the round. Then I'm going to slip stitch to my very first stitch. Alright, for the next round we are going to chain 2, and then in the first stitch we are going to work 3 double crochets. 1, 2, and 3. Then we're going to skip 2 puff stitches, and in the chain space between the second and third puff stitch we are going to work 1 single crochet. After your single crochet, you will skip the puff stitch, and then down in that little valley you are going to work 5 double crochet stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Skip 2 puff stitches, work 1 single crochet in that chain space in between your second and third puff stitch, skip the puff stitch, then work 5 double crochets down in that little valley where we made the single crochet from our previous round, and you will repeat this process all the way around. Alright, and then I'm going to single crochet in that chain space, skip the puff stitch, then work 5 double crochets into that little valley down there. 2, 3, 4, and 5. And I'm just continuing on, single crocheting in that chain space, skipping that puff stitch, then working my 5 double crochets into that stitch. So you will repeat this all the way around until we reach our very last stitch, and we're going to do something a little different. Okay, as you can see here, we're coming to the end of this round. Now we did 3 double crochet in our first stitch. We are actually going to do 3 double crochet in our very last stitch as well. So there's number 1, number 2, and number 3. Now we are going to slip stitch to our very first stitch. For this next round, it's just a little bit tricky at the beginning and at the end, but it's not super hard. So what we're going to do is we're going to chain 2, and we're going to work 2/3 of a trident puff, which means we're going to work 1 puff stitch into our first stitch, chain, chain, add another puff stitch into that same stitch. Turn over, pull through, chain. Now we are going to skip 2 stitches and single crochet into our next stitch. So that's where my single crochet will go. After your single crochet, you will skip 2 stitches and work a trident puff stitch. And as you're looking at your hat as you're making it, you will notice that every trident puff stitch will go into that middle double crochet from our previous round. So it's very easy to spot where you need to put your trident puff. So here I am making my trident puff stitch. Okay. And I think my yarn is getting tangled, so I'm going to fix that really quick. Sorry about that. Okay, I'm going to finish this puff stitch off. And then I'm going to skip 2 stitches and single crochet. And you're just going to repeat this process all the way around until we get to our last stitch, and I'm going to show you what to do there. So I will meet you back when we're at the end of this round. Okay, as you guys can see here, I'm almost to the end of this round. Now I just did a single crochet. I'm going to skip 2 stitches and then work another trident puff stitch. So I'm going to do that. Chain, chain, then working back into that stitch, I'm working another puff stitch. Chain, chain, then going back down into that stitch, I'm working another puff stitch. Yarn over, pull through, chain. Now I'm going to skip 2 stitches and work a single crochet. And now to end this round, I'm going to skip 2 stitches and work 1 puff stitch into my very last stitch, and then add an extra chain because we want it to mimic a trident puff stitch. So in your very last stitch, you're just going to work a puff stitch, then add a chain 1, So here's my puff stitch, chain, chain, then you're going to slip stitch to your very first stitch to end this round. And that is it. Okay, for this next round, we are going to chain 1, skip our puff stitch, then work a single crochet into that chain space. Then we are going to skip the next puff stitch and work 5 double crochets into the next stitch right there in that little valley. There's number 2, there's number 3, there's number 4, and here's number 5. Next, we're going to skip 2 puff stitches, work a single crochet into that chain space, then skip the puff stitch, and into the very next stitch we are going to work 5 double crochets. If this looks familiar, it should, because we've done this already in previous rows. So we're just shifting everything over, but you are going to continue that all the way around. You're going to work your 5 double crochets, skip your 2 puff stitches, work a single crochet into that chain space, skip the puff stitch, then work your 5 double crochets. And we're going to do that all the way around, and I will meet you at the end to show you where we put our last stitch. Okay, so I just did my 5 double crochets, and right there after my puff stitch in that chain space, I am going to work my last stitch of this round. Then I am going to slip stitch to the very first stitch. From here on out, we are just repeating rounds 2 through 5 until you reach your desired length. So chain 1, single crochet, skip 2 stitches, then you're going to work your Trident Puff stitch. So this is a repeat of round 2, and you will repeat rounds 2 through 5 until you've reached your desired length of your hat. So keep working, and when we come back, I'm going to show you how to close your hat and finish it off. Okay, so I've made my hat to my desired length, and I have fastened off my yarn, leaving a long tail. And now I'm going to thread my yarn needle. And what you're going to do is, I find it easiest if you stand your hat up right, and you're just going to work your yarn back and forth through every single stitch all the way around. Then we are going to pull it really tight, and it's going to cinch it all together and close it. So I'm going to keep working, I'm just going to go back and forth through every single stitch. And I will meet you back when I'm at the end of this. Okay, as you can see here, I've just been taking my yarn needle, working back and forth through every single stitch all the way around, and I'm coming to the end. So I'm just going to keep working here. And now you're going to take that strand and pull it really, really tight without breaking the yarn. And as you can see, it will pull the hat together, but there might be a small hole left. So with the rest of your yarn and your yarn needle, you're just going to sew up that hole. And it only takes a few stitches to sew up this hole, but feel free to do as many as you'd like. All right. And I'm just sewing my hole up all together because we don't want to have any spaces there. And after you get your hole sewed up, you're going to tie off your yarn, make a knot. But for time's sake, I'm just going to put my yarn needle down into my hat so I can show you all what your hat should look like. Okay, so I'm just pulling my yarn through, and for time's sake, I'm just going to shove it into my beanie, but I definitely will finish this hat off properly. But this is what your Trident Puff Beanie should look like. I hope you enjoyed this pattern. It has such great texture. I'm going to make a bunch of these for my fall market. And if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and make sure you subscribe to my channel. Thank you all again for watching, and I hope you make a bunch of these and make sure you tag me in them on social media because I love seeing your work. See you all soon.